exceptional siblings, and I was living in a great town in a great era of U.S. history. And so it wasn't really until my mid-30s when I experienced a little bit of an impediment in my career direction, or, in terms of moving forward in my career, that I was able to go back and revisit what had happened to me 30 years previously and get a grasp of how exceptional it was and what an obligation I had to tell the truth of what I had experienced.
Yeah.
But it was a great adventure, and I think, as the book will show, it was really a high adventure. My father stated shortly before his death in 1990, he asked me to tell the story of what we did in Project Pegasus because, as he said, we were in something great. I mean, it was really a phenomenal adventure, and it was an important emergent period in terms of human functioning in the universe. I remember we met the scientist William Shockley toward the end of the experience, as he was at that time the principal technical advisor to the U.S. Army. And I remember him, Dr. Shockley, saying something actually very brilliant, which was he thanked us for helping the U.S. government prove that time travel was possible, but he also explained that the reason that they had decided to explore time-space is because when they explored space, all they were going to get was what was going on at that time at that location in the universe. But by exploring time-space, they were potentially going to be able to explore everything that had ever gone on anywhere in the universe.
God.
So there were really some very brilliant people who had been responsible for launching Project Pegasus, and I want to emphasize that as well. It really was a great period of exploration, a great research enterprise, and I think that the field itself holds tremendous potential for humanity.
Were there any other kids involved in the program that you've stayed in contact with and that can share a similar story? Has anyone else gone out with its information, or are you the only one at this point?
Well, that's more problematic. When I was on the project, I was told that 140 children were involved, of roughly my age, a couple of years younger and older. So these would be individuals born roughly between 1959 and 63. I would say around that age group, probably centered around 1961, because most of the kids in the program were my contemporaries. I was born in September of 1961. I made an effort to find and interview my peers in my particular learning lab in New Jersey. There were groups of 10 that were arrayed in 14 different colors, and each of the groups was assigned a color, and there was a particular captain who had been assigned to that small regiment of children. So I was the captain of blue team. And in other words, I had to exercise special duties if something disastrous happened when we were time traveling. In fact, there was one mishap where I actually essentially pulled rank and told the kids what we were going to do. So the 14 captains had even additional specialized training. I don't think that's the reason, by the way, that I remember what happened. There's a number of reasons why I'm one of the rememberers. But when I tried to find the other children who were assigned to Blue Team, which was a cadre of children who were going to my school and several surrounding grammar schools in northern New Jersey, I found something very interesting. I found that they remembered me. They remembered being involved in gifted and talented education in childhood. They began to remember the very strange things that we did in the learning lab, including being spun to induce out-of-body experiences, including sitting in this chair where they were having astral projections, and including getting certain specialized forms of intelligence and military training. Then I would mentally try to take them to the places where we were taken off campus. In my case, that was the Curtiss Wright Aeronautical Facility in Woodridge, New Jersey, where the teleport was. We were taken up to a Chronovisor location in Convent Station that was then moved to an historical building undergoing historical renovation in Morristown, New Jersey, where General Washington had wintered in 1777 and 1781. There was also a defense contractor location where one of the big Chronovisor arrays was at the ITT Defense Communications Building in Nutley, New Jersey. And I would interview each of the fellow participants in the project some of them even remembered that we had been shown that we were in a federal research project under what was originally ARPA, which then became DARPA.
Yes.
And that we were taken to defense locations like the Defense Communications Facility, of ITT in Nutley. But then strange things would happen in the interviews. For example, I would say, okay, well, let's follow up next Saturday. And then I would call them a week later, and they would, let's say, not remember talking to me. Or not remember, they would remember that I called the previous weekend, but then not be able to remember what we had discussed. One individual who not only was in my grammar school, but I knew he was in the project, and I'd gone to Sunday school with him as a Catholic school kid, and he lived in our neighborhood. So we literally grew up together. I remembered the fact that one time when we teleported to Santa Fe, he ran around the building and practically collided with me, the Baton Memorial Building, which was literally the building they were trying to teleport us right next to. And during that teleportation in New Mexico, I had been addressing him as Kevin, which is his given name, and he kept on insisting that he wasn't Kevin, he was Scott. And so I knew that when I interviewed him, that when we were in the project, he was amnestic about who he actually was. And so I was interviewing him pretty gingerly, trying to avoid, causing him to begin panicking or be troubled about what we had been through. But when I started to describe the teleportation experience, he started saying, "Oh yes, God, yes, I know we were doing that. Yeah, I haven't thought about that for years, Andy. I can't believe we're talking about this." And then he panicked and hung up. So my conclusion was, especially when I reconstructed several of the torture sessions that we had been involved in, the electromagnetic shocking that they were doing to us when we would return to the Curtis Wright facility after teleporting back from New Mexico, I realized I was dealing essentially with a special class of witnesses, a class of witnesses that had been both traumatized by what we'd experienced and directly brutalized by the Defense Department handlers who were working with us.
God.
So as they took us down the rabbit hole of quantum access, they also took us down the clinical corridors of mind control.
Yes.
And so part of my story is my own effort as an individual to try to bear witness to what happened and to go back and recover what happened so that it can advantage humanity knowing it by overcoming the brainwashing that I was subjected to. The true story, in fact, of my effort, my 10-year effort to go back and find out what happened in Project Pegasus, not only as an exercise of memory, but as an exercise of direct field investigation on my part, was really a matter of overcoming the brainwashing and establishing the people, the places, the technologies, and the experiences. And at this point, I have 225 passages for my book. I still have to synthesize it into a narrative, but I've essentially gone back and spoken now to 10 government insiders. I wouldn't call them whistleblowers, but they were people who confirmed basically three things. One, that Project Pegasus existed under DARPA, that it involved time travel technology that had just been developed by the United States government when I found myself in those experiences, and that I myself indeed was one of the children attached to the project. So I'm going to be identifying who those people are and what they know and what they told me. Do I have a smoking gun piece of evidence that I was in the project and existed? No, I don't have my name on a U.S. government letterhead. But I'm going to be identifying who was involved and what they did in the project and what they know and how they know it.
And try to get them to speak out as well?
Yes, I'm going to be publicly calling for Defense Secretary Donald Henry Rumsfeld and New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, one a Republican and the other a Democrat, to now come forward and reveal to the American people and the people of the world that the U.S. government developed teleportation and was using it for teleportation-based time travel beginning in around 1967-68. I mentioned that Secretary Rumsfeld, who was a person that my father and I knew and had a lot of contact with on the project and regarded as a very fine man. He was very respected in the program. He was the point man between the project engineers and federal science administrators like Dr. Agnew and the Pentagon. So he is one of the insiders who should have some of the most important memories of what Project Pegasus achieved. I'd